Kia ora, I'm Erica Wilkinson, New Zealand's Acting Threatened Species Ambassador, and this is the Doc Sounds of Science podcast. Every episode, we talk about work being done behind the scenes by Doc's technical experts, scientists, rangers, and the experts in between. Kia ora, ko Erica Wilkinson tēnei. He kona I purangi tēnei, e pā ana ki ngā Sounds of Science. Today we're taking a big picture view of conservation with Mahi Oranga Senior Analyst Aroha Gilling. Kia ora, Aroha.
Kia ora, Erica.
Aroha is an academic and experienced treaty ranger. She and her team provide crucial guidance and education for the Department of Conservation Te Whai to help us be a good treaty partner. She's also a mega fan of all creatures, big and small, in the Rangitahi Molesworth Recreation Reserve. We are so fortunate to have Aroha on the show today to share some of her knowledge and her kōrero. Do you want to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Oh, kia ora. Nā mihi kia koutou katoa. Hei uri ahau o te whānau a Apanui, whakatohea, me ngai tahu hoki, ko Aroha Gilling tāku ingoa. Kia ora, I'm Aroha, and I'm a descendant of te whānau Apanui, whakatohea, and ngai tahu.
Welcome. It's wonderful to have you here. So, first up, would you tell me a bit about your role at Doc Te Whai?
Well, currently I've got two roles. So I'm seconded at the moment to the Mahi Oranga Treaty Team, which is a nationally based team. And we're working on making the treaty settlements visible. So the same way that biodiversity work, heritage work, is recorded in a big database and generates tasks, well, eventually treaty work will work the same way. But then I also have another role, and my day-to-day role is as the Treaty Settlement Ranger, the Senior Treaty Settlement Ranger for Te Tau Ihu, or the Northern South Island.
Brilliant. What does a treaty ranger do?
Everything. Absolutely everything. I like to think about my job as kind of 360 degrees. So if you start at one point of the circle and look outwards, I'm responsible for working with our own staff to help them develop skills and expand on the skills they already have to work well with our treaty partner, with iwi, hapu and whānau. Turn a wee bit further around the circle, and I'm responsible for seeing that Doc is meeting our treaty obligations as stated in the Settlement Acts. Keep going. And I work alongside iwi, often in a support role for one of the other key Māori roles within Te Whai Doc. And then you keep going again, and I work out in the community, helping our community partners learn about working with iwi, hapu and whānau.
Wow, that must be an incredibly varied and rewarding role to be doing.
It's incredibly exciting, it's very challenging, and sometimes I put my head in my hands and wonder what on earth I've got myself into.
I'm sure you're doing a wonderful job. So what's unique about the responsibility for us to Whai with regards to the treaty? Can you talk me through that?
Sure. It's all rooted in having one of the strongest treaty statements in an act. So the act that governs the mahi, or the work that we do, is the Conservation Act 1987. And Section 4 of the Conservation Act says, this act shall so be interpreted and administered as to give effect to the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi. So the real crunch in that sentence is the shall. It means we have to do it. We have to find a way to bring the treaty to life and the principles of the treaty to life in the work that we do.
Wow, that's fascinating. And the give effect line, is that important as well?
It is. Give effect, I like to think of as making the treaty principles come to life, put them into operation, make them real, make them meaningful.
So sometimes there's a perception that science conservation and Mātauranga Māori are worlds apart, or that they can't align, but there are plenty of experts saying that that's not the case. Is that an attitude that you encounter in your work?
It's certainly something I'm aware of, and I've been following very closely a lot of the discussions around this, because to me, an integrated approach to conservation means Western science and Mātauranga Māori, not one subservient to the other, both working in partnership. And I look to people like Reriata Makiha and Rangitahi and I look at bodies of knowledge that they are retelling and reintroducing generations to. And that knowledge has been built up over centuries of close observation of the natural environment. And not only close observation, but observations for survival and for flourishing. So there is just so much that can be learnt from that kind of close observation and learning over hundreds and hundreds of years that can't be dismissed. I think that mātauranga should never be regarded as an add-on or a body of knowledge to be co-opted or distilled by Western science. I would like to see Western science learn to respect mātauranga and its practitioners and learn how to work alongside these people, because I think that my ancestors, my tipuna, weren't fools. They knew how to live and to prosper in the natural environment.
Before your work as the Senior Treaty Settlements Ranger, you spent a lot of time in training and education. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Sure. I've spent about 2 decades working in tertiary education, primarily as a treaty educator. And I've worked across a number of disciplines, but the main focus of my mahi was in social work and health and wellbeing providers. So 2 decades of that has helped me refine my craft. And I started out as a very raw presenter and slowly built up a base of skills and knowledge that's eventually brought me to Te Papa Atawhai and into the roles that I have today.
And in the education space, I've heard that you run into something called tikanga bloopers. Is that something that happens a lot?
I think it is. I think it's really common. Tikanga bloopers, the term, was coined by a colleague of mine. And it's a way of explaining those common mistakes that we all make when we're interacting cross-culturally. But the next step is, what do we do with it after we've made the mistake? And that's kind of the body of knowledge around tikanga bloopers. We're all going to make mistakes. I've made some stellar ones. In fact, I've got a photo to memorialise one of the ones that I made with myself and the then, he was Attorney General, and I think he was the Minister of Finance. And possibly Minister of Treaty Settlements. Let's throw that all in. Michael Cullen. And the blooper is, in fact, the photo. I had my then husband with me at Marae Nui on the East Coast during the seabed and foreshore meetings with the Crown. So Parikura Horomia and Michael Cullen came round to speak to iwi and hapu across the country. And I hadn't thought to, explain the tikanga of a pōhiri or the welcoming ceremony to my husband, or to talk him through what was expected of him. I just sort of thought, let's be frank, I was overwhelmed, and I just sort of hoped that we'd get through it. And halfway through the pōhiri, so as they're coming up the hongi and hariru line to shake hands and mihi to each other, as Michael Cullen drew near to me, my husband darted out of the line and took out a camera and took a photo of the whole event. And the look of horror, I still remember the look of horror on my mother's face to this day. But that's a tikanga blooper. And I guess the important thing about understanding them is that often our staff will experience things like that. And there's no malice intended. But the embarrassment of the event can often induce paralysis. So people get too frightened to do anything. And part of the education I do and help to contribute to across the educational packages that we deliver is learning how to get past that. Use what you learnt and move on. So, yeah. And I've had to do a fair amount of that myself.
That's so important. I feel like you need to be able to fail in order to progress, right? You need to not be scared of that.
Absolutely.
So what does a typical day look like for you now? It sounds like there are no typical days, but give us an example.
Well, as I'm still seconded to Mahi o Rangitahi, a lot of what I'm doing is meetings and training. But a typical day as a treaty ranger is something quite different. You can never tell what's going to happen. So it might be something like going on a trip to support our kui and kaumatua as they travel across the rohi or the region that we live in. It might be helping out in an emergency response, supporting the iwi participation in the emergency response. But I think the thing that really stands out for me are those beautiful moments that just catch you by surprise. And it's things like watching the face of the kui and the kaumatua as they get to go somewhere that they haven't been for a long time, like Onitahua Farewell Spit, or where you're able to help them go and see somewhere spectacular like Rangitoto or D'Urville Island. So those all require, sort of dock support to get there, whether that's in four-wheel drives, whether it's a long trip along the Farewell Spit at in Golden Bay. And we can do that for them. We've got the resources and the staff, and we're able to take them there to see these things and be part of the whenua and connect with it.
You're a highly regarded treaty academic, and Doc benefits hugely from your expertise. How did you get into this field of work?
I think I can track it back to when I was about 12, and I think that was when we first interacted with the social studies curriculum. I've probably just dated myself with that statement. And we had an introduction to the Treaty of Waitangi. And it wasn't a good introduction. Even at 12, I was absolutely certain there must be more to the story.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember going to the library and getting out about 6 books that all mentioned the treaty, and they were appalling. At 12, I could tell they were appalling. But I think that's kind of where it started, and it persisted. It's persisted my entire life, to be honest. And I still remember the excitement when Claudia Orange first published her book, which was the published form of her doctoral thesis. And it was really exciting. For the first time, there was really good quality information from a really credible author. And the other one that I really loved, that I remember from, I think, I can't even date that one, sometime in the 80s maybe, was Ka Whawhai Tonu Mātou by Ranginui Walker. So really exciting to get those kinds of books, one from a Māori author, one from a Pākehā author, that helped to build that picture of what I'd sensed as a 12-year-old, that there was far more to the story than we were being told. So that's kind of how I started. I cut my teeth on workshops in the 90s, which wasn't easy, and some of them were horrific. I still remember some of them today. But each time I did a tough one or a good one, I learnt something, and slowly I've built up this kete of knowledge about delivering this kind of education.
That's pretty incredible. And Claudia Orange, I think, won the Prime Minister's Literary Achievement Award last year. So I just love that she's still being recognised for that nonfiction work. What do you like most about your work? Is there something you can pinpoint?
Well, it was those moments of wonder. That's kind of all I can think of to call them. I'll give you some illustrations of what I meant by that. I think of sitting in the hot pools at Awakiri, just outside of Whakatane, with a group of our staff, listening to one of the local iwi narrate their kōrero about the stars. And you're looking up through the steam rising off the hot pools at the stars right there in the sky. Another one from the same trip was sitting on the spine of Mo Tohora, or Whale Island, actually watching whales transit by and listening to Te Kei Merito talking. Other examples, listening to Uncle Joe Harawira teaching our staff about the Māori perspective on the beginning of human life on a hot summer day on Otamahua or Quail Island in Whakaraupo, Littleton Harbour. So, it's that magic of connecting with the natural environment, but connecting with it through that Māori lens, I think that's the highlight of my job.
You make it sound so magical like that, and Joe Harawira is such a superstar, isn't he?
Yeah, he's great.
One of my favourite conservation questions to ask is, what's a species that you really love?
Oh, one species. Couldn't possibly pick one, Erica. Let's see. Actually, my story about the species that I really care about, or two of them anyway, starts back at Onitahua Marae in Golden Bay. So there's the whare there, Te Ao Marama. The house was the decoration of it was overseen by Robin Slow, who's a wonderful local artist and part of the marae whānau. And some of the images that he depicted there really got me curious. So one of the images that occurs in some of the panels are something known as the Clifton spiders. Basically, it's an albino spider that's blind and the size of a dinner plate. I've always wanted to see one. I really have. I've spent a lot of time clambering around looking for them, and I've only ever seen their spider webs. So they have to go on my list. And another one that I saw for the first time illustrated on the walls of Te Ao Marama was the Poella Fanta snail. Now, I have actually seen them. And I just think they're the most beautiful things with those burnished brown shells. And I'd have to admit that I quite like the notion that they're carnivorous and that they eat worms by sucking them up a bit like we eat pasta.
Have you seen that clip of one doing it?
Yep, I have.
So
I've
good.
sent it to friends all over the world.
Look what we've got.
Of course, I've got a bird on my list as well.
Go on then.
It's the tarapirohi, or the black-fronted tern.
Oh.
And I got to know them on Rangitahi Molesworth, or the Molesworth Recreation Reserve.
Okay.
And I think what appeals to me most about them is it's actually the way they look. It's a very shallow reason, but they've got these little black skull caps that remind me of World War I flying caps. And so that's the kind of marker I use to identify them. So they're one bird that I'm absolutely definitely sure I've got right. So I look for the little grey feathers and the little black skull cap.
Easy to find, surely. And aren't they the ones that dive bomb you when you get too close to their nest? So it's so apt for their little skull cap.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. And they're struggling. They're under serious threat. But my colleagues from South Marlborough have been working alongside International Wildlife Management to enhance their habitat and give them a fighting chance.
Fantastic. I feel like there's really a theme with your favourite species, perhaps. So seeing as you've spent a lot of time there, what's your favourite memory of being in the Rangitahi Molesworth Recreation Reserve?
Yes, it is a place I'm incredibly fond of. One of my colleagues in Nelson, after I first went there, looked at me and said, "Oh, look, you're falling in love." And he was absolutely right. I have most definitely fallen in love with Rangitahi Molesworth. Actually, a favourite memory was a Christmas time memory from this year. And it's just one of those moments of wonder. I was just driving back from doing something up at Sedgemere, which is one part of the reserve, and we came across these three men halfway up a scree slope, and they had a camera. I thought, oh, I bet that's interesting. Let's stop and find out. So we pulled up and wound the window down and called one over. He looked slightly panicked. I was like, "Oh, you look like you're doing something interesting there. What's going on?" And what they were doing was that they were photographing something called a pen wiper. And a pen wiper is this amazing fleshy kind of, I think they call it a fleshy herb. It looks like it should be part of the succulent family, but it's not really. It's one of those incredible plants that you only get to see every 2 to 3 years. It lives on scree slopes, and the botanists, I think, call it a transient plant because it's not always in the same place. They take quite a long time to mature, which could be the reason you only see them every 2 or 3 years. And they have a really distinctive, highly fragrant flower. But the best bit is why they're called a pen wiper. So they were named after the strange contraptions that Victorian England made to wipe their quill pens on, which was essentially a bunch of rags tied around a stick. So if you can imagine a big bunch of rags wound around a stick, then you've got the basic shape of a pen wiper.
You've done a lot of work over the years delivering Te Pūkenga Atawhai, the Māori induction course. Can you tell us a bit about what this is and your role there?
Sure. Well, this was a wonderful course that was started, it must have been in the 80s when they first designed it. And that was people like Te Kei Merito and Joe Harawira involved in that. Dave Para, I think, was on board at that point. And so they came up with this notion that in order to support our staff to interact more respectfully with iwi, hapu and whānau, that we needed to be providing a consistent education program. So they went out and developed this training program. It's delivered across 4 kawai, and the kawai are broken down into little bits of information that you can learn and interact with and reflect upon. So the 4 sections are interacting with whānau, hapu and iwi, values and beliefs, te tiriti o Waitangi, and systems and structures. So that first visit to Ōtākau Marae I was talking about, that was my first Te Pūkenga Atawhai ever. And I was really lucky because the guest speaker in the Te Tiriti o Waitangi section was Professor Jacinta Ruru, who's well known internationally for the role that she played in the personhood of the Whanganui River and Te Urewera. So I have been privileged enough to go on to present the Te Tiriti o Waitangi section at, I think, 14 or 15 Te Pūkenga Atawhai in the 5 years I've been with the department. Yeah, it's a real privilege to watch our staff learn. And I think one of the things I really like is that Te Papa Atawhai staff are already passionate about their particular area. So it's not a big leap for them when you introduce them to good quality knowledge. It's not a big leap to be passionate about that as well.
Hearing you talk about Te Tiriti o Waitangi is quite a life-changing experience. There's often a lot of emotion. Is that a common reaction?
It is, because essentially we're challenging long-held notions about Te Tiriti o Waitangi, the Treaty of Waitangi, the principles of the treaty. Mm. I think I touched on the notion that the education around this hasn't been great. There's been some wonderful teachers, and of course we've just lost one of the best, Moana Jackson. So, ngā mihi kia Moana. Mm. He was a real inspiration. But outside of people like Moana, like Ranginui Walker, quite often this hasn't been taught well. And often when you are presenting new information that challenges people's beliefs, that's quite a painful process to go through. So it is very evocative, and it does bring up a lot of emotion, because often we're asking people to put aside things that their parents have told them, their grandparents have told them, things they believed were true, and listen to a different narrative.
Mm. I was lucky enough to be at the Predator Free Summit last year, and I heard Dr. Melanie Mark Shadbolt talk about the treaty, what the treaty promises, and it's contextualized it a bit more for me, and absolutely blew my mind. I remember scribbling things down, like the Queen got married 4 days after the treaty was I had no idea. I don't remember learning this when we were watching Castaway in social studies. It's just, I was a bit frustrated, but also there's an expiry date to blaming your education. You've got to find out for yourself, I guess. So we've got a scenario for you. So imagine you're in a lecture hall. You've got 30 eager minds ready for you. What's the coolest conservation story you can think of to hook them in?
Actually, I'm going to be very naughty and pinch one that is going to appear on a BBC documentary in about October. So, apologies to David Attenborough, but I'm going to nick it out from under him.
Copyright Aroha Gilling.
So I'm based in the Nelson Regional Office, and we have a series called The Doc Talk, and this has been going for 2 or 3 years now. where each person in the office does a half-hour update about something they've been working on or something they're passionate about. So last week's was one of our senior advisors, Graham Elliott. Graham's a extremely good storyteller, and he was talking about his and his partner Kath's volunteer work over summer, where they go down to the Antipodes and they monitor the same section of the island and looking at the wandering albatross. And they've been doing this for a long, long time. But it was this one little story that really captured my imagination. So in terms of fishing, there's a whole lot of regulations about ways that fishing boats need to mitigate the damage they do to things like creatures like the wandering albatross. But in international waters, it's much harder to monitor those boats and see that they're actually using the mitigation techniques. And so a lot of birds are lost to bycatch. So on the Antipodes, there's a lot of these old male birds who have had partners and they've successfully bred with them. But they come back and their partner's gone. They've been part of the bycatch. And these poor old boys, they're just lonely and looking for their partner. And he had this photo of a male wandering albatross standing forlornly by his nest site on a cliff top. And the younger female birds, they might check these old boys out, but they don't really want one of the old fellas. They want one of the hot young fellas. And so these old boys get passed over year after year after year.
Oh, no.
So what they've observed happening is the old boys are starting to pair up with each other. And then the next shot he put up with is these two old wandering albatross boys paired up on their nest together for company.
Oh, that's my favourite wildlife story ever.
Really, it's Graham's, not mine. I pinched it, but it was just such a wonderful story.
Oh, what a story. That took a turn that I didn't expect, and I'm so here for it. I love hearing things about that. And with wandering albatross, like that they can go years without touching land. There's just so many incredible native species facts that just blow your mind. Any native species fact that blew your mind when you learned it?
Let me think about it. Well, it's probably not quite as mind-blowing as the wandering albatross, but I've always had this thing about the scree skinks. It's a Rangitahi Molesworth story again. I always thought they looked like little dragons, but I became even more attached to them when I learnt that sometimes when they're threatened, they dive into a puddle.
Do they?
They do. I just found there's something so transporting and entertaining about these little brown dragons plunging into a puddle.
Oh, that's I think the mountain stonewedder, when it gets attacked, it pretends to be dead and it throws up on itself. Like, oh, buddy.
Oh, sometimes you wonder about adaptability. Has it really worked?
You're not helping yourself. Come on. What's something that you wish more people knew about your work?
Let me see. I have to have a wee think about that one. Actually, I think it has to do with visitor behaviour. So I spend a lot of time on Rangitahi Molesworth Recreation Reserve, and I volunteer at Christmas as a camp host. I work there throughout the year, often going to visit it with Ngāti Kuri of Kaikoura and my colleagues from South Marlborough. So I know it pretty well. But this year I noticed there was a real change in the way people were interacting with the environment. And something I'd really like to see is people learning about a place before they go there. So Rangitahi Molesworth is high country. There's an unsealed road all the way through it. It's not a state highway. You can't get the AA to come in and rescue you if you drive off the side of the road. There's sharp turns, blind corners, steep drop-offs. It's hardly got any road marking. And there's no corner dairy halfway through. So quite a thing I see quite a lot of is people that don't come prepared for that kind of environment. So I'd really like people to do their research, find out where they're going, take plenty of water, food, and appropriate and other appropriate gear so that they are well prepared and safe. And there's all sorts of other things too. This is a really special environment, Rangitahi Molesworth. We've got over 70 threatened plant species there. So I would love to see people treat that environment well and not ride their motorbikes on the shale and not ride the motorbikes and their four-wheel drive vehicles off the roads. Stick to the campsites. Just that one. Use the loos. What is it? The poo in the loo, please. Not all over the place. Take your rubbish home with you and look after the important historical sort of places like the cob cottages. Yeah.
That's very good advice, that kind of know before you go. And also that weather watch stuff that I feel like people don't quite take into account and then get stuck.
Yeah, I quite often hear the farm staff on the radio saying someone's left a gate open. And that can set the farm operation back by hours and hours and hours as they recover lost stock. Yeah.
So I guess when we're talking about what's something you wish more people would do, it's
their homework.
Yeah, their homework. Not difficult. Working in conservation can be challenging and working in the treaty space can be challenging. What kind of thing keeps you going?
The opportunity to combat racism, to contribute to people learning something new and hopefully changing an attitude, helping to build allies for iwi, hapu and whānau across the country. I think that's really important. And engaging people with good quality information. So I think we've got quite a sophisticated audience these days who can get information from all sorts of different sources really quickly. So one of the things that I like to be part of is providing good quality information from good sources.
For people at home listening, realising they don't know enough about Te Tiriti, are there any recommendations on resources they could start with?
I'm a book lover, so I'm starting with books. And I can't go past Claudia Orange once again, An Illustrated History of the Treaty of Waitangi. It's accessible, the information's great, and easy to digest. And then if you like that one, go the next step, get the textbook. Another one I think is a great piece of writing is, I think I've already mentioned it, Orangi Nui Walker's Ka Whawhai Tonu Mātou, Struggle Without End. This was a really important book because it was one of the first histories authored by a Māori writer. And it stood up well over time. And for a more contemporary book, I think you can't go past the Treaty of Waitangi Companion, Māori and Pākehā, From Tasman to Today, and that's Vincent O'Malley. And that's for the people that like the bigger story. This is a great book. It not only has that kind of standard timeline that you would see in a treaty book, but it tells you the wider context of events in our country when something happens. It looks at key documents, it's got photographs, it's got quotes. It's one of those books you can pick up and you can read a bit and you think, well, I never knew that when it was happening. So a good example of that would be the pine on One Tree Hill being cut down. Or what's known as He Taua. The events surrounding the clash between Māori protesters and engineering students at Auckland University. So, yeah, it really pads that history out.
I've got such a list to go to the library for. That's great. Thank you very much. And such a breadth as well. Thank you so much for your time, Aroha, and your generosity with your expertise. I hope people have learned a lot. I know I have.
You're welcome, Erica.
Thank you for listening. I'm your host, Erica Wilkinson, and this has been the Doc Sounds of Science podcast. This show is available wherever you get your podcasts, or you can stream it off our website, doc.gov.nz. This podcast is produced by Jane Ramage, with sound and editing by Laura Honey. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review and show our hard-working guests some love. Ka kite!